Good afternoon. I'll sort of work with the PowerPoint, and you'll have to bear with me as I'm not techie like Michael and Mary are. So first thing we're going to do is we're talking about the Jigsaw of Care, and we're going to be addressing the care issues that families have and the importance of having a power of attorney and the potential consequences of not having a power of attorney. This is what I'm going to be covering today. First of all, we're going to talk about what is the Care Guide and Care Connect. We're going to talk a little bit about myself, Joan McDonald, and a little bit about my background and what I do. We're going to cover power of attorney relating to care and the power of attorney information and how it affects your family. Case studies, we're going to talk about some case studies that show the effect of the care issue of power of attorney. We're going to analyze those case studies to see how we did and what we could do. And then we're going to have questions answered about power of attorney, living will, and capacity assessments. So we'll start with the Care Guide. The Care Guide, and I think Mary has brought you this book, started being published in 1993, and it's Canada's most comprehensive resource for seniors and their families about care services and also housing for seniors. And this book that we have, we've changed our format. This goes all the way across Ontario. So this book talks about if I've got a family in London, let's say, who has a mom in Toronto, this now serves one book. They'll be able to find choices in London and Toronto. So from the Care Guide, what we've done is we had calls coming in, and what they would do is they'd look at our book, they'd review it, and they said, it's great information, but what do I do with mom? So we developed a company called Care Connect. And Care Connect is a network of nurses, and what we do, we provide a helpline. So the first thing is the helpline where people can ask any question. And usually it's, I'm in a crisis, I'm not sure where to go, how do I get into long-term care, that sort of question. And we offer that on an ongoing basis. And we also offer elder care management. Now, elder care management is a skill that's developed from extensive training and hands-on experience. Whether coping with a crisis or planning ahead, we provide knowledge, expertise, direction, trust, and solutions. So, and it's an ongoing process. We deal with families every day. Who am I? Who am I? My name is Joan McDonald. I'm a registered nurse. I've been working in community health for over 18 years. I've been working with Care Connect for 4 years, and it's an honor to be able to work with families and their adult children to work through the maze of healthcare. So let's look at power of attorneys. And I know that you've already had a session about power of attorneys. So I'm going to go through the different power of attorneys. So there's 3 different kinds. So power of attorney is a legal document that gives someone the right to act on your behalf. And there are 3 different kinds of types of power of attorney. First is the continuing power of attorney for property. This covers the financial affairs and allows the person you name to act for you even if you become mentally incapable. This is a big thing here. So if you become mentally incapable, that power of attorney can still act for you for property. Then there's the non-continuing power of attorney for property, and that covers financial affairs but cannot be used if you become mentally incapable. You might get a power of attorney, for example, if you leave home for a period of time and you need to have someone look after your affairs. And the last one is the power of attorney for personal care. And personal care covers your personal decisions such as housing and health care. Okay, so today we're going to be looking mostly at personal care because that's what we want to talk about. So we're going to talk about, for personal care and health decisions such as where you live, what you eat, what medical care you need, and if you are sick or injured, you name that person who's going to be the power of attorney for you to make your decisions for you if you can't make them. So I'm going to start off with giving you a case study. And this case study is an example of continuing power of attorney document helped a family and allowed a seamless transfer of decision-making from father to his family. So this is a 77-year-old male. He living independently, and he in his own home, and he has 2 grown children. And over the last 2 years, he's had increased short-term memory loss. So he does not eat proper meals. He has diminished personal care, so he doesn't do his personal care. He has increased frustration and agitation, and that's continually getting worse. And his family members have initiated a visit to a psychogeriatric specialist, which we have quite a few of them in our area, which documents his diagnosis as mild to moderate dementia. So Care Connect was involved with his family. They asked us to come and help to deal with his declining status. Care Connect provided an assessment of his home and his needs, and we provided short-term and long-term care plans for the family and for this man. This particular gentleman had a continuing power of attorney. So, and as you know, as we talked about that before, that means it covers his financial affairs and allows his family members to act for him as he is deemed, at this stage, he's deemed mentally incapable. So let's analyze what about this client. So the first thing was that the client and his family had the foresight to get the power of attorney, the continuing power of attorney, signed. And due to this being done, there was no need for a capacity assessment. And a capacity assessment means that is he deemed capable or not capable? So they didn't have to do that. It also identified the increased inability to make capable decisions of their father. So as he decreased in his ability to make decisions, they were able to take over and do that. There was a need to help to navigate the healthcare system on behalf of the dad, which is ongoing as per his status because his memory loss is getting worse. The other thing that happened with this gentleman was that he was put on a long-term care list. So as he decreases, they knew that they had a long-term plan for him to go to long-term care. So we've talked about the power of attorneys, the 3 different power of attorneys that we all have defined. Now we're going to look at living wills. A living will is a document you write down when you want what you want to happen if you become ill and cannot communicate your wishes about treatment. For example, do you want to be kept alive on artificial life support if there is no hope of recovery? Another term for living will, which they use a lot now, is called advance directives. So if you're in the hospital, they always talk about when you're admitted to the hospital, what are your advance directives? And that's what that is. That's the living will. So a living will is not the same as a power of attorney. Power of attorney is a legal document which names a specific person to act on your behalf. A living will is where you write down your treatment wishes and should be part of your power of attorney. So that's the difference between the 2. Okay, so let's go to our case study number 2. This is a professional in his mid-60s caught without a POA. So this is the case of a 67-year-old practicing lawyer. So again, he's a practicing lawyer, so he knows all about the legal aspect of a power of attorney, right? Not. So this gentleman had suffered a stroke, and actually while he was working, and he had right side paralysis. So he's also right-handed. And he also had aphasia. He was aphasic, which means that he loses his ability to speak. So all of a sudden, he's a productive young man, and now what's happening, he's in a situation where he can't even communicate his needs. I met this client following a referral from his doctor. He did not have a power of attorney set up, assuming he would attend to that when he was older. His son had to become his decision maker. So let's look at that case and see what happens with that. So the client couldn't relay his wishes to his family. They hadn't even talked about it. I mean, they haven't even talked about what's going to happen or what are we going to do. And the result is the total frustration and depression on his side, because he couldn't relay what his wishes were, but also on the part of the son had to make assumptions about what his dad would like. Could the outcome have been better? Absolutely. If he had had a power of attorney and a living will, then at least the family would have guidelines. So he would have assigned, and maybe the son wasn't the best person to be his power of attorney. But because he was the family member and he was able to take over, he was the one making the decisions. It's never too early. Never. Okay, so now we're going to look at capacity assessments. Capacity assessments is the formal assessment of a person's mental capacity to make decisions about property and personal care. Under the Substitute Decision Act, many situations require capacity assessments to be conducted by specially qualified assessors who must follow specific guidelines. Again, capacity assessment is, can they make a decision or not make a decision? So that's what it comes up to. And if you can't decide, then this capacity assessment has to make that assessment to say, yes, they can, or no, they can't. Okay, so how is mental incapacity defined in Ontario? Because it's different province to province. It's pretty well the same, but there's some tweaks that each province has, so you have to look at the province where you're living. In Ontario, finding of incapacity relates to certain types of decisions. For example, a person who is found mentally incapable of managing their property or finances is not necessarily incapable of making decisions regarding their personal care. So maybe they're not making decisions about banking and debts and paying their bills, but they can still function doing personal care and looking after themselves in their home. A person is incapable of personal care if they are not able to understand information that is relevant to making a decision concerning their own health care, their nutrition, their shelter, their clothing, their hygiene and safety, or is not able to appreciate the reasonable, foreseeable consequences of a decision or lack of decision. So if you look at our case study of our gentleman who was living at home, remember that he was the first one, and he was not taking care of himself. But in his mind, he felt that he was totally capable of looking after himself. And so his house wasn't as clean as it should have been. He wasn't eating the meals, but in his idea was that he was able to do that. But technically speaking, he's incapable of making that decision. He's passed by that because he doesn't understand the consequences of not making the right decisions. Substitute Decision Act. There's lots of acts here. Substitute Decision Act is a law that governs what may happen when someone is not mentally able to make certain kinds of decisions. The Act covers financial and property management decisions and the decisions about personal care, which includes healthcare, food, and housing and safety. A person who makes decisions for another person is called a substitute decision maker. Okay, so our third case study illustrates the steps to be taken when appointed a substitute decision maker. So this case study is regarding a 94-year-old independently living woman She has 2 grown children and was very aware of making her own decisions about what she wanted and what she didn't want. She sold her home and she moved into something called a life lease. And a life lease is when a retirement home offers condos in their retirement home. So what you do in a life lease is you can get the meals, you can get the nursing, you can get the care, but it's still your own home. So it's different. So she had 10 years ago had moved into a life lease, sold her house, moved into a life lease, was very active, and then she fell. She fell, she fractured her hip, she was sent to hospital, she had surgery, she had many complications from the surgery. After that, she became very confused, disoriented, and uncooperative. And so her daughter had to become her substitute decision maker. So before the hospital discharge, what happened with this woman was that there was a care conference that was called. And a care conference, just so everyone knows, is when all the people in the caring team get together and talk about their recommendations and their prognosis. So that's the doctors, the physiotherapists, the occupational therapists, the nutritionists, everyone gets together, and the family. So during that time, often Care Connect is part of that care team. They all got together, and the end result was, number one, this lady needed 24-hour care, which means she needed care all the time. And they also deemed her palliative. And that word palliative means because she's gone through so much, at 94, she was deemed, she wasn't recovering like she could, and she wasn't responding the way she should. So the daughter had to become the substitute decision maker. The reality hit the daughter of the shocking cost of home care and caring for her mom, because all of a sudden she was very independent, she could look after herself, she was making those decisions, and then bang. So if she looked, the daughter was looking, for example, and I'll just give you a couple of examples of this, when she was looking at how could she provide 24-hour care for her, first thing was, it was $22 an hour to get it from an agency. That's $550 a day, which turns out to be $16,000 a month. It's a lot of money. So that was one option for the daughter. The other was to try and combine things together. So she could ask the home, the retirement home where she was, if they could get more care from the home, which they offered at assisted living, but that was like $2,000, but it would only cover like 90 minutes a day. It's not very long, which you need 24-hour care. So the other thing was, could she go into long-term care, and they call it complex care or convalescent care, they call that. Could she go in there? No, she couldn't because she was too sick. Like she wasn't in a rehab path, she was on a palliative care path. So that was eliminated for the daughter as well. So after much talk, and the other thing I should talk about is the public system, which is the Community Care Access Center, CCAC. CCAC is what our OHIP dollars are paid into. So, and that's free for us. But anyone who's been in that system knows it's pretty hard to get into, and it's really difficult to get the amount of care that you need. So she actually ended up by coming back to her home with care. And the care was from public, it was from the retirement home, and it was also from a private agency. So let's look at this, analyze exactly what happened here. Family needed professional help to navigate the maze of healthcare, because it's difficult, because how do you do it all? Care Connect was able to provide solutions to the daughters as she was unexpected. She didn't know she was going to have this role as the substitute decision maker. So we went through some of the things there about cost. What happened with this particular woman was, and she was very lucky because she had the financial means to be able to do what she did. She did have, CCAC was wonderful. CCAC came in, and because she was deemed palliative, was able to get 54 hours a week. So that means night shifts. That means that this lady was able to get night shifts free from the CCAC. She got some care from the home, and she got paid for some private care. So all in all, it worked out, but trying to get through the maze was really difficult to do. What do you do? Because most people in this situation, she would have been sent to convalescent care or to an emergency crisis placing for long-term care. So normally, families are faced with that, saying, well, what can I do? Can't go home, can't afford the nursing at home, she can't be left alone. So what do? The hospital will say, sorry, she's gone from acute to chronic, so that means that she's going to be moved to a long-term care facility. And the problem with the long-term care facility may be that long-term care facility has beds because nobody wants to go there. Not necessarily, but sometimes that happens. So, in wrapping up, these are some of the points that, what do we do with mom? Go through the power of attorney process and have all 3 documents signed. Make sure you do it. It's through the Ministry of the Attorney General. This is what the form looks like. Anyone can get them. You don't necessarily have to have a lawyer do it. We talked about this in a minute. You can do it yourself. Fill it out, but you do need to have, well, as it says here, choose the person you assign, and that is the person you trust to represent you. And it could be more than one person. The best protection is to obtain legal advice. It's optional. You do not have to do it. All you have to do is you have to have 2 witnesses that aren't family that will sign this document. Keep your power of attorney in a safe place. Put it in your safety deposit box. Write your living will. And review your care needs as they change as you get older. So, and how do we find solutions? You call Care Connect. There's one other form that I want to talk to you about, and that is that people who are looking after elderly and they have to purchase things and provide care, this is called a disability tax credit form. And this is a tax credit form that I use with Care Connect all the time. It is a form that is signed by your doctor, and there's lots of qualifications why you will get a tax credit. The services of Care Connect come under this umbrella because we're providing registered nurses and providing care. And then you send it to Revenue Canada. Revenue Canada approves it, and then you can get tax credits up to $10,000 a year. So if you have 2 parents, you can go buy both. So just so you know that that's available. Elder care is a concern for us all. You know, and as our population is aging, and as our dollars are getting less in our public system, we all have to be aware of how can we navigate the system best. So I'd just like to thank you for your time. I hope you have some questions so we can talk a little bit more. Thank you. So just so you know how this book works, this year we have changed our format. It used to have 3 different books in Ontario. We now have 1. For that reason that I told you, if we have families in one province and they have to look after their mom in another province, this has helped that. So we're trying it out, see if it's going to work. I think that basically what this book does is it lists all the areas. In other words, for the retirement homes, like this lady is looking, at the back of retirement homes, it will list every city and every retirement home that's there. It may not have it all in the advertising, but all the lists are there. So it does it for the community services, for home care, et cetera, et cetera. We've got a great website that you can navigate called thecareguide.com. And thecareguide.com, what it does is it has lots of resources in it, but it also, if you're looking for a home care company in Orangeville, then you go into our website, you go into search, you put Orangeville, and it will come with all those informations, with all the names, numbers, and every information you need.
Joan, we have a question that I got yesterday. Does your website cover other areas other than Ontario?
Right across Canada.
Across Canada?
Our website is now geared to all right across Canada. Yes, sir.
The Care Connect service, right? That's the commercial one, right? People pay for the service.
They do. They pay for that service.
For a simple to a complex case, what kind of price range are we talking about?
Basically, I'll tell you how Care Connect works. We provide the helpline free of service, so that there's no cost to that. Once the nurse comes out and starts to make care plans and does an assessment and makes care plans, what she does is she charges by the minutes that she uses, and it's $100 an hour. So average out, it's usually around $500 by the time that nurse finishes with the meeting, care plan, organizing. But the other side of that is whenever they need them, they're always there. So lots of our clients, we may start with the crises. The client goes into a retirement home, she's perfectly happy for a year or two. Then they phone us back and say, no, she has to go to long-term care. So then we help them through the search to find the appropriate long-term care facility. As you know, the gatekeeper for long-term care is the CCAC. So we just help to make sure you get the best one. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just, you can reprimand me either way. You know, after listening to all the speakers and even you, why should I become a power of attorney and take on the responsibility? Not just go ahead and keep caring for my mother the way I have.
That's a very, very good question. And you.
Could you repeat the question for the people at home? They might not have.
Okay. The question is, for example, as a son, and my mother's been ill, why should I become her and take on the responsibility as being her power of attorney? Because it's a huge job, let me tell you. And I think that people have the right to refuse it. And I know that there's other people who are speaking because there's a liability issue as well. When you're talking about property and money and you've got siblings, there is a liability issue that you are the one, not just the executive, but you're the making decisions, the power of attorney. Even though you're accountable for every cent that you do, you can be challenged about what your decisions are. So it's a very good question because there are many people who refuse to be a power of attorney. Just because they're family doesn't mean you have to be a power of attorney. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
If your power of attorney is an only child, this resolves a lot of problems, does it not?
Yes, it does. It does. I mean, but the other side of that is you have the right to appoint anyone to be your power of attorney, right? So that if the kids are not the one that should be making those decisions for you. I mean, I find the hardest thing for me is when a family, when a senior has nobody. So then she has to make the decision, who's going to take on that responsibility to make my decisions if I can't make my own decisions. So it's tough. It's really tough. But, I find that usually it's 2 children out of 4 that will take it. And there's lots of challenges. Lots of challenges. When it comes to property and money, not about the care, because usually they're together about the care. It's when you come to property and money that's why it's really important that perhaps in that situation you should go to a lawyer. It's important to have that lawyer as your backer.
What about having your power of attorney and executor of your estate the same person?
That's good.
Once again, an only child.
Yeah, but that stands to reason, right? I mean, you want her to represent you, and she knows you the best, and she knows what your wishes are. The only thing that I would suggest to you is that you make sure that you have a living will. So you write down what you would like, and then what you need to do is make sure that that's part of your power of attorney. Good for you. Can I just look around and say who's got a power of attorney in the group? Good. Not all. Not all.
Joan, we have a question if you can address it. Can you go into a little bit more of an explanation around how this capacity assessment works and explain that in a little bit more detail, please?
Okay. It's sort of complicated. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so what we do is we're looking at capacity, right? Capacity and incapacity. So capacity is that do they have the ability to make their own decisions? And incapacity says they're not able to make those decisions. And it's not just for property, it's for care as well. So it's for both. So if we have a family, for example, that you know the parent is making unwise decisions, and they could be going to the bank and giving their money to the guy that he next meets. So he has $100 in his pocket and he keeps doing that. There's nothing to stop him from doing that, right? I mean, he can do that until the family says, look, it's not realistic. He says, I want to do it. So in this situation, what has to happen is the Attorney General's office is the one that you have to go to. So if there's no continuing power of attorney, remember, because that one allows you to have the power of attorney if indeed they become mentally incapable. So you have to go through the Attorney General's office. You phone them and they have a section called capacity assessment. Now, what they do in the capacity assessment is that they come up with assessors. And an assessor is a professional who has training. They've had training as to what to do. And it could be a doctor, it could be nurses, it could be a lawyer who is all part of this capacity assessors. You, the family, or you, the person, you pick that assessor, you phone up, you get to talk to them, you figure out who you want. That capacity assessor comes to your home, usually comes to your home, and assesses the senior. So they have to make that decision whether they have any sort of judgment about making the right decisions and the wrong decisions. So it takes about 2 hours, and then what happens is he goes away, makes his report, and says, yes, he's incapable, because he doesn't understand the consequences of his decisions. So he can be deemed incapable. It's a big thing for a family to state that your loved one is incapable of making any decisions. I mean, I think that's the hardest. That's what I've found. Families really have a hard time with it, and I don't blame them. But what happened, I think that, I just lost my train of thought for a sec. So once they're deemed incapable, then the courts, what they do is the courts will assign somebody to look after their affairs. Usually it's family. Family's the first one that's ever given to look after their affairs. If the client says, I'm not going to have that assessment, there's nothing wrong with me, then you're in a different situation. He can refuse it. That family member can refuse to have that, but then you have to get a court order to get him to be assessed by the assessor. So it's a long process. And I'll tell you, the problem is that, is what happens is that we're right in it. You know, you're in the crisis, what do I do today? And they're saying, well, get a court order, you have to get an assessor, you have to, so it's really difficult. So consequently, get the power of attorney signed early.
Yeah.
Yes,
Joan, we have another question that I got on an email yesterday, and the person went to your website and tried to understand what you do at Care Connect, and I guess what she was saying to me to ask you is, you see so much about families and you deal with crisis, obviously, and you get called in the middle of the night if it's a stroke or some situation. She was hoping to figure out how to have these difficult conversations with her mom and dad about what they would like for their care options, and they're at home and she sees them getting older and declining in health, and she's even afraid to bring up these topics about care and how long you stay in your home, or do you come and live with me, or do we move you somewhere else. So she sees what could happen, but she's even afraid to bring it up with her mom and dad. Do you have any experience around guiding families even to start this conversation?
I think starting is the hardest. I think that the process that you have to do, and every family is different, and I think that I can only tell you that when people are young and well, you sort of bring it up as a topic and you say, you know, lots is changing. And you know, that's why the care guide has really been good for us, because the care guide starts the process. If somebody is at home and say, you know, I picked up this book and it's got really interesting things and it shows 1, 2, 3 steps as you age, you know, things you should be looking at. So that's what we find this book. All the health care professionals in the hospital have this book. Doctors have it, etc. And it's a really good tool to start. I think that the other thing is that they have the option with Care Connect to phone us, to phone our 800 number, and ask, because I think that there is lots of ways. There's lots of wonderful books that are out there that say, you know, here's a book, how to do it, how to start. And the problem is we all wait too long, because if you wait too long and your loved one is failing, then it sounds as though you're saying, what happens when you die, Mom? And of course, that's not what you're talking about at all. What you're saying is, how can I help you? So I think basically that's the best thing to do, is to get in touch with a professional. It could be a doctor, it could be Care Connect, it could be a social worker, anyone who starts that process talking about what would you like. Thanks, Mary, for that.